Hey guys, I'm Nem Stankovic. I am a filmmaker and comedian from Toronto and Tesla enthusiast. And today I'm interviewing Marc Seifer, one of the most foremost experts and authors and biographers of all things Nikola Tesla. It's an honor and a pleasure, Marc. Thanks for sitting down. I know that the Tesla Legacy Conference had a little bit of a Murphy's Law situation, and unfortunately, we couldn't get our tech going. So this video is going to be going up for all the guests that were there, along with the public who is interested in Tesla. So I appreciate you taking the time today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for tagging along. And yeah, I guess the first thing I would want to ask you is who is Tesla to you, and what was the landscape of the world, especially the U.S. when he arrived to America?
Yeah, I learned about Tesla in a very strange way. I was teaching courses on parapsychology,
Wow,
ESP, and I was writing articles for two magazines, ESP magazine and another magazine with the name Ancient Aliens. The
nice.
television show Ancient Astronauts is kind of based on the magazine, at least it's covered the same theme. So I was studying this mystic. His name was Lobsang Rampa. He was supposedly a Tibetan Lama who was could see auras, and he could see auras around the Dalai Lama, the one before the present Dalai Lama. And the Dalai Lama supposedly was using him to be able to use psychic ability to see whether or not if the person that he met was a good person or a bad person. You don't find out to the third book that Lapsang Rampa doesn't is no longer alive, and that the actual author, his name was Cyril Hoskins, and that he was a British plumber, and that supposedly he got very depressed because of World War II and wanted to die. And
Wow.
Rampa wanted to live, so they swapped souls in the astral plane. And Rampa takes over Cyril Hoskins' body and writes 14 books. They're great books. They're really, really good books. So I went down to New York to study, to write an article on this crazy story. And I came upon a book about avatars, enlightened beings who come to the earth to help humanity. One of them was Rampa, another was Jesus Christ, and another was this guy, Nikola Tesla. It was 1976, and I had never heard of Tesla. And it said that Tesla was the inventor of the hydroelectric power system, the induction motor, fluorescent and neon lights, remote control, robots, etc. Neon. And so I thought, the Rampa story seemed to me pretty crazy, but this story said that he was born on the planet Venus and he came to the world at this very amazing time when the world is being polluted with all these local power plants throwing coal and smoke into the air. So when I got back to Rhode Island, the editor of the magazine, Howard Smuckler, knew all about Tesla, and he gave me the first major biography on Tesla called Prodigal Genius, and another crazy book which said Tesla was living on a UFO circling the Earth, landing in this guy's backyard in Canada. So that's how I started. So when I read the O'Neill book, it's a superb book. At the same time, I purchased a 1,000-page book of Tesla's writings and patents and articles, which was initially published by the Tesla Museum in Belgrade, Yugoslavia in 1956. And this was a reprint. It's a big, thick book. And I had all of these patents. So the Rampa story was very wild. It was, very bizarre. And this story was a little bit wacky, but I had patents. I had something concrete. So what I wanted to do was get into the heart and soul to see if Tesla really was the inventor of the induction motor. Was he really the inventor of the AC hydroelectric power system? Was he really the inventor of fluorescent and neon lights? Was he really inventor of wireless communication? So I dug into the history of all these uh, 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 inventions, and I found that there was a lot of misinformation, there was a lot of obscuring of information and hiding Tesla's role in all these projects. And at the same time, there were gaps in the O'Neill book. It's a beautiful, wonderful book, but there's whole missing sections of Tesla's life. So I set out to create a strict chronology, and that's in this book, Wizard, The Life and Times of Nikola Tesla, where I literally follow his life year by, almost month by month, sometimes year by year. And what's so weird about this is that in a certain way, I know Tesla's life better than I know my own life. For instance, I know what Tesla was doing in 1892, 1893, 1894. I don't know what I was doing in 1992, 1993, 1994. I know generally what I was doing, but not to the specificity that I know Tesla's name. So that was the landscape that I was dealing with. Tesla was, his name had completely disappeared from the history books. The O'Neill book was actually published by a UFO organization. And almost nobody knew his name. And so when my book came out, it was very well received. It was reviewed in a full-page article in the New York Times in 1997, 1996, when it actually published. Scientific American called it serious scholarship. MIT's Technology Review reviewed it. Nature reviewed it. So it really got a lot of publicity. And I think my book helped re-energize interest in him because I made a big point of having endnotes where every single thing that I stated was backed by a footnote so that someone couldn't say, oh, well, he didn't really do this. Well, here's the endnote. Go find it yourself and you'll see that it's all real, that he really was all of the inventor of all those inventions. And that's really the landscape of what it was like when I started out in 1976. Took one way or another 20 years for the book to come out. And it's now in its 27th printing. And it's doing very well.
Wow, congratulations. That's really exciting. I actually haven't read your books yet. I have friends who have, and they speak very highly of them, and I'm really excited to delve into them. I wanted to ask you, in terms of books, what your thoughts are on other biographies of Tesla. I know there's probably a spectrum of opinions on him. And one book that I did read, I think it was Margaret, is it Margaret Cheney?
Yeah.
Margaret Cheney is a man, I believe it was Man Out of Time. And I really enjoyed that one. She did a good job of capturing his character. But I did want to ask you what your thoughts are on other books on Tesla, and also kind of like where mainstream science stands with Tesla. Because I hear a lot of critical things about Tesla, but like understanding that the seeds of all the technology we use today is seeded in some way by Nikola Tesla, and then hearing so many critical things from mainstream scientists like I don't know, he was a lousy physicist, but he was a good engineer. These things are like, oh, you can't use the word savant or things like that. I find it intriguing. I guess the critique aspect of it, because I've done some digging myself, and I was raised around the culture of Tesla. So I see how amazing of a man he was. Like you said, maybe he was a reincarnated spirit of a higher dimension, but he was definitely someone who didn't really think like the average scientist, and he didn't really specialize. And from what I learned, he got these downloads and these visuals of like all his inventions. So I just kind of wanted to hear your perspective on like what you have to say to like mainstream scientists who are critical of him, and then also if there's any other books that you enjoyed where people can learn more about Tesla, obviously aside from yours, which will be next on my reading list.
Okay. Um, the O'Neill book, as I said, is an
Yeah.
excellent book, one of the best books I've ever read. And again, the reason that I wrote my book was because there were gaps in the O'Neill book. The Cheney book, Man Out of Time, is also a very nice book. One of the things about the Cheney book, and one of the reasons I was prompted to continue on my research and publish my book, was there are missing gaps in her book as well. One of the biggest gaps in her book is why Tesla failed at Warden Cliffe. And so I set out to figure out what happened at Warden Cliffe. And I imagine most of the people watching today know about Warden Cliffe. But those people that don't know about it, um, this is a crazy, I'll be right back. So.
No worries. No worries.
I pulled
Just
apart
watch your
here.
you knocked the book a little bit. You
What?
you knocked the book a little bit. We'll just cut this part out.
Okay.
Yeah, you can start back from Warden Cliffe.
Yeah, so the Cheney book's a very nice book. It's a light read, and I enjoyed reading it. But one of the things about the book is it doesn't explain what happened at Warden Cliffe. And for those people that are watching this who might not know what Warden Cliffe is, after Tesla invented the hydroelectric power system, he actually, spoke in 1897 as the inventor of the hydroelectric power system put in by the Westinghouse organization, and his name is listed 9 times on the patent plaque. So anybody who thinks he didn't really invent it, just go to Niagara Falls and look at the patent plaque, and you'll see that his name is there, and you'll see that he actually spoke as the inventor of the hydroelectric power system. Before Tesla, you could only send energy about 1 mile, power dropping off over distance. And this was with direct current, which Tom Edison was using. And Tesla worked for Tom Edison, and he wanted to uh, explain to Edison that he had a new invention, which was much more efficient. But Edison did not understand how you could harness alternating current. Electricity, by its nature, changes its direction of flow. So imagine getting a water wheel to go around and around one direction if the river was flowing downstream and then upstream, then downstream and then upstream at thousands of times a second. That's what electricity is. It's alternating by its nature. So what they did was they invented something called the commutator. And what the commutator was a series of wire brushes. So you have these wire brushes with a gap. And so if electricity is coming here, if it's going in this direction, it can jump the gap and go in this direction. That's direct current. And when it's reversing, it goes back in the other way. So the commutator allows electricity to go in one direction by jumping that little gap, but it's highly inefficient. And that's why in Edison's day, in the 1880s, you could only send electricity about 1 mile, power dropping off over distance, and only for lighting homes. So in order to illuminate the whole Northeast where I live, New York City and Philadelphia and Boston, that whole area, there were 3,000 local power plants uh, at every mile or every other mile across the civilized world here, and most of them were run by coal. So the air was very polluted, and that's the mystical side. You mentioned the mystical side of Tesla's light. Had Tesla not come in when he did, the DC would have been so deeply entrenched, it would have been much harder to change things. So what Tesla felt intuitively was if God or Mother Nature, or whatever you want to say, created electricity go in two different directions, there must be a way to harness this efficiently. And it came from Goethe's idea. Uh, Goethe was a philosopher, a German philosopher who wrote Faust. And the point of Goethe's teachings was that all the answers are in nature. Right now, I'm dealing with the whole COVID thing, and I wrote a book on the immune system called Ozone Therapy for the Treatment of Viruses with 4 medical doctors. And the idea is if we want to solve all the illnesses that exist in the world, all we have to do is study how the immune system really works. The vaccines, for instance, they don't kill anything. What a vaccine does is it alerts the body ahead of time, and then your body creates antibodies, which then, in the case of COVID, will kill the COVID virus. So if we can emulate that process, then we can cure diseases that normally are incurable. And in the same sense, Tesla felt if God or Mother Nature created electricity go back and forth at thousands of times a second, there must be a mechanism to make it run efficiently. So he spent 5 years of daily work to figure out how to do away with the commutator, and he created two circuits out of phase with each other, and the end result was the rotating magnetic field, which was the invention of the induction motor. And the end result was that instead of sending electricity 1 mile with power dropping off of a distance only for illuminating homes, you could send electricity hundreds of miles to run factories. So it's kind of comparing a horse and buggy to a rocket ship. Tesla was the rocket ship. So I think the mystical side that you mentioned, uh, there's a mystical element that he had to come in at this moment. Otherwise, we would have been dealing with a much more difficult situation. Um, so that was one aspect. What was your initial question to me?
I
Because I was actually headed to,
I I was interested because it's popular to be critical of Tesla in
oh
mainstream
yes.
science. And you know, they say he was great, but like when you dig deep, it's like what you just explained. He essentially created electricity as we know it in alternating current, created, discovered, you know, invented, whatever the best word is. But then there's so many other things that he did, like we'll get into the wireless technologies and all that, but like there's radio and you know picture transmitting information, he wireless and he didn't specialize, which you know scientists are trained to specialize in one thing and be the best in that one little aspect
Yeah.
and as a cog in a machine. So I don't know. Personally, I find it interesting that a lot of people kind of look down on Tesla when he's one of the most fascinating people in human history. And it tends to be from dogmatic mainstream scientists.
Yeah, well,
So
you know, you mentioned what my thought of books are. There's a book that came out a few years ago from Princeton University Press. People see Princeton University Press and think, well, this guy must know what he's talking about. He basically reverse engineered Wizard, but he doesn't really know what he's talking about because there's two things in particular that he says in this book. The first thing he says is that Tesla did not understand Maxwell's equations. Well, anybody who doesn't know that Tesla obviously knows Maxwell's equations has never looked at Colorado Springs Notebook. Colorado Springs Notebook is Tesla's work in wireless communication that he did in Colorado. And it's a very interesting story. Now, um, Dr. Marinchens, who was the head of the Tesla Museum for many years, he passed away a couple of years ago, had found when looking through all the notes and the hundreds of thousands of pages that they got when the United States eventually released the papers, uh, was he took notes of all the research that he did in Colorado Springs in 1899, and they're very high level mathematical equations. John O'Neill, when he wrote Prodigal Genius, he knew Tesla for 40 years and he was a Pulitzer Prize winning science writer. But he mythologicalized Tesla. He made him into a mythological being who only envisioned things in his mind. Tesla did envision machines in his mind, and he did run them in his mind to see what went wrong. But he also worked it out mathematically. He has equations. I was an honors math. Even took a double honors math class. I cannot understand the equations that he does. They are very, very complex equations. So Dr. Marinchens was speaking to the board at the Tesla Museum. He said, let's publish Colorado Springs Notebook. And the board was saying, no, we have this idea that Tesla figured it all out in his head. We don't want to take away that magic thing that he did. And Marinchens says, this makes him even more amazing because he envisioned these things. And not only that, he worked out the mathematics. So the guy who wrote this new book from Princeton University Press, which says that Tesla didn't understand Maxwell's equations, it's idiotic. It's just plain idiotic. And that people see Princeton University and think, well, you know, they must know what they're talking about. So that's part of the problem. The second thing that he said, which is ridiculous, is that he said that Tesla used illusion to sell his ideas to George Westinghouse. I mean, it's just, that's the kind of stuff.
the illusion that we use every day today, is that the illusion he's talking about? That's wild.
I mean,
Yeah.
Tesla really, you know, we overuse the word genius, but you mentioned, you know, how Tesla is so inspiring. Tesla really is a genius. And one of the reasons, the very reason you said, he didn't just work in one little area. He didn't just perfect the induction motor. He went into wireless communication. He went into airplane design. He had two different kinds of air. He had a invention of a jet plane you know, jet planes didn't come into the end of World War II. Tesla had a jet plane concept in 1909. So, you know, 40 years, almost 40 years earlier. Tesla also invented what became the Osprey helicopter airplane, where it takes off like a helicopter, and then the propeller rotates into the regular position and becomes an airplane. He had patents on that. If you look up Bell Labs, which study Tesla's stuff, you'd be hard pressed to know that Tesla has really invented the Osprey. And the only reason I know that is because Tesla has an actual patent on what he called the flivver plane. So they did a lot to hide his research. Another reason why his name disappeared was General Electric was trying to, the war of the currents. They were trying to win the right to harness Niagara Falls with their inventions, and the only way to do it was to steal Tesla's ideas. So when Charles Steinmetz was writing textbooks on the AC polyphase system, he purposely left Tesla's name out because Steinmetz was working for uh, a, a corporate competitor. It's really equivalent to writing a book on the theory of relativity and somehow forgetting to put Einstein's name in. I mean,
Hmm.
that's how horrible Steinmetz's decision to leave Tesla's name out of that book is. So
Wow.
that's some of the reasons why his name disappeared from the history books.
So in a sense, he was vilified by other people in,
Corporate greed,
yeah.
and competition.
And do you think, what do you think Tesla's biggest mistake was? Do you think is when he ripped his royalty agreement up with Westinghouse?
That was one. He should have had a deferred payment, or he should have reduced it. He was getting, I think, $1 a watt. He could have made it 10 cents or 5 cents. I mean, you know, it was
He
a
wouldn't
lot of
have
money.
needed investors.
Yeah, it was a lot of money. But his real mistake, and it took me 2 years of daily work to figure this out. I wanted to, when he built Warden Cliffe, which was a big wireless operation out on Long Island, he got $150,000 from JP Morgan. Now, when you really study this, Tesla was saying to Morgan, I need $200,000 to build a tower to send electricity to China, to the Pacific, to Japan. I need 100,000 to send it to Europe. And Morgan was actually generous. He said, I'll give you 150,000, send the electricity to Europe. I want wireless uh, uh, impulses because when I go to Europe, I go there every year for a few months. I want to be able to follow the stock market on Wall Street. And Tesla said that's no problem. So in 1901, Morgan writes a check for $150,000. He got paid a little bit over time, but he gave him literally 150,000. That's a lot of money even today. I think it's equivalent easily to 15 or 20 million today. I mean, easily that kind of money. What happened was Tesla had offered his wireless patents to Marconi through Sir William Preece. Tesla had spoken at the London Academy of Science, the Royal Society of London, in 1892. And he stayed at Preece's house. And, William Crookes was there, and Lord Raleigh was there, Lord Kelvin was there, Dewar was there, Oliver Lodge. Um,
All the hot shots.
yes.
And for those who don't know, Marconi is credited as the creator of the radio.
So Preece contacts Tesla and said, Marconi is doing some interesting wireless experiments. This is 1896, 4 years after Tesla stayed at Preece's house. So Tesla said to Preece, well, I'll give him some of my equipment and, let's see what happens. And Marconi said, I don't need Tesla's equipment. Well, in 1901, right after Tesla formed a partnership with Morgan, Morgan goes to Europe and Tesla starts to build this tower. His architect is Stanford White. Stanford White was the greatest architect of the day. I live here in Rhode Island. The towers in Narragansett, where I live, is my favorite building of all time. It's a little castle that you drive underneath. It's got a tunnel that you go a little underneath. He designed Rosecliff Mansion and the Tennis Hall of Fame in Newport and the Capitol Building in Providence, which is like the third or fourth largest unsupported dome in the world. It's just a beautiful building. It looks like a miniature Capitol in Washington, D.C. So he's the greatest architect of the day. Morgan is the greatest financier of the day, and Tesla is building this tower. He promised to build a 90-foot tower. It took me years to figure all this out, all the letters between the two of them and putting all this together. And so in April of 1901, Marconi writes an article in one of the electrical journals and said, yeah, wireless communication, the way to do it, you take a Tesla coil and you do this, that, and the other. And Tesla freaked out. He was really annoyed because he had offered his equipment to Marconi, and Marconi was saying, you need to use a Tesla coil. So what Tesla decided to do was to double the size of the tower. His idea was that if he built a 90-foot tower, he could send wireless impulses to England, which is what Morgan wanted. But if he built a 180-foot tower, he could send impulses around the entire Earth. So not only would Europe be the market, but South America, Australia, China. So in other words, even though the cost would be double, the revenues would come in at a much greater rate because he'd have the ability to communicate with the entire world, not just with Europe. So Morgan was also involved in the Northern Pacific Railroad, and he got into a bidding war with Ned Harriman, and the stock went from $150 to $900 a share almost overnight, and it resulted in a stock market crash. So Morgan comes back as being vilified as a robber baron who's caused the stock market to crash and a panic on Wall Street, et cetera, et cetera. And it's that moment that Tesla decides to go visit Morgan and ask him for more money because he ran out of money because the creditors wanted to get paid and he would build a larger tower than they had contracted. So Morgan saw it as a breach of contract, which it really was. And Tesla said, yeah, I know I breached the contract, but you don't understand. If I double the size of the tower, it'll only cost double, but the monies will come in at a much greater rate. $150,000 to Morgan was not a lot of money. He was spending $40,000 on a little jewelry box. He was spending $110,000 on a painting. So to give him another 100,000 was not a big deal. But Morgan saw it as a breach of contract. To me, though, the key here is not that Morgan no longer was going to give him any more money, because I think Morgan had actually a right not to give him any. But when Morgan, where the terrible part of this story is, Morgan didn't just not give him more money. Morgan blocked Tesla from getting money from other billionaires of the day. For instance, Tesla was living in the Waldorf Astoria at the time. One of the other people Tesla was living with was Henry Clay Frick. Frick owned U.S. Steel along with Carnegie. Carnegie got something like $320 million when U.S. Steel was bought out by Morgan, and Frick got $60 million. $60 million in today's I have no idea. It's hundreds of billions of dollars. So he's going to a major billionaire, and Frick is very impressed with Tesla's equipment and what he wants to do. And they're both living in the Waldorf. And so Frick meets with Morgan, and the deal doesn't come through. Morgan meets uh, with Schiff and also with Thomas Fortune Ryan. And I go into great detail into the actual days that Morgan meets with Ryan. And Ryan had given Tesla $10,000 and was willing to give him the other 90 right after he meets with Morgan, and the deal falls through. So Morgan blocked Tesla from
He
succeeding.
blacklisted him from the community of investors then.
Yes. And so the question is why? And I think it's complex. I think number one, Tesla deceived Morgan. And I think that really ticked him off. I think another reason, though, was wireless communication threatened Morgan's other holdings. He had rubber plantations in Africa. Now, to get rubber, which for the insulation for the copper, you got to ship it. So you have the rubber plantations, you have shipping. He had copper mines out west. He had lumber yards in Alaska. So Tesla threatened lumber, copper, rubber, shipping, all of that with a wireless system. So I think Morgan was partly afraid that if Tesla were to succeed, uh, other of his industries would crumble. And right after Morgan totally destroyed Tesla's ability to raise the money, and Tesla gets a nervous breakdown, which I show through his handwriting. I'm a handwriting expert. Show his handwriting falls apart in 1906. In 1907, there's something called the Panic of 1907. And banks folded. Morgan didn't help one of his bankers. His name was Barney, and Barney committed suicide. He owned the Knickerbocker Bank. But the reason for the Panic of 1907 was a run on copper stocks. So I think once wireless was dead because Morgan had ended Tesla's wireless operation, copper became important again, and they started manipulating the copper stocks. That was in 1907. So all that is linked to what happened, in Tesla's world.
Wow. Yeah, it's nothing's black and white. I know that from Tesla's mind, he wasn't a capitalist. He just wanted to better humanity. And maybe that was one of his downfalls in America as an inventor, but as a visionary, I think we chatted about it at the festival. It's like imagine he got to create everything and he got all his funding. He we could have been like hundreds of years into the future by now. And I kind of wanted to lead into the wireless stuff a bit more because from what I understood, the basis of the radio is Tesla's work that Marconi used. I know you mentioned that he used the Tesla coil to build the final
Yes.
radio when he rejected Tesla. What else were the seeds of Tesla's work around the radio and other wireless?
In 1898, Tesla had a remote control robot, which was a boat, which he showed at Madison Square Garden. Madison Square Garden was designed and built by Stanford White and funded by J.P. Morgan. The garden had a tower where White met his ladies friends up there, and he invited Tesla up to the tower, for different parties. And the tower was the tallest building in New York City in 1890. It was 300 feet tall, so it was a 30-story tower. So just to give you an idea of how fast, New York rose up. In 1890, the tallest building was 30 stories high, 300 feet high. So he shows his remote control robot. Now Tesla was always trying to end war. So the robot was also conceived of as a torpedo. And he felt that if every country had a very powerful torpedo, then no country would invade another country by sea because the torpedoes would sink the ships. So it was that concept. So suppose you send a torpedo out and the bad guys get your frequency, they can make the torpedo, in theory, turn around and explode your ship. So Tesla had to come up with the idea of protected privacy or encryption. So if you look at the boat, there were two aerials on his remote control robotic boat. Those two aerials are two separate frequencies. When you study Marconi in 1901, when he sends electricity across the Atlantic Ocean and puts his name into the history books and gets a Nobel Prize for it, Marconi, he even tells you, did not know what frequency he was using. He was so new and so much of an amateur when it came to frequencies. Tesla was now multiplying frequencies. He was combining two frequencies. So let me give you an example and explain why Tesla is the real inventor of cell phone technology. Let's say there were only 10 frequencies that exist on the planet. That means you could only have 10 cell phones. But if you could combine frequencies, you'd have 10 times 10, which would give you 100 cell phones. And if you could do three frequencies, you could do 10 times 10 times 10, which is 1,000 cell phones. So if there were only 10 frequencies available, you could have as many as 1,000 telephones. But of course, there are thousands of frequencies. That's why there are billions of cell phones today, each person with their own channel, all based on Tesla's invention, all patented, of how to multiply frequencies, all embedded in his remote control robot, which he showed in 1901. Another aspect of the robot was the steering mechanism, the rudder. The rudder worked on an on and off system. If the electricity went one way, the rudder went one way, and if you turned it off, then the spring would cause it to go in the other way. So you literally could direct the ship with an on and off system. That's a binary code. And when you get into the whole idea of computers, Tesla actually invented the whole concept of the binary system used in computers. And so he's really an early precursor of the inventor of the computer, all in that. So I think Tesla deserved the Nobel Prize for his remote control robotic boat, shown in 1898. And I think they only give Nobel Prizes to living people. But I think that we could make a case that the Nobel Committee should make an exception and go back and relook at that invention of his remote control robotic boat, which has so many inventions in it. It's got the cell phone technology. It's got the remote control, which you use in the television, garage door opener, wireless communication, robotics, artificial intelligence. All of that is all in there. In fact, when Tesla spoke in 1898 at Madison Square Garden, he said, I have announced a new species on the planet. I've invented a new species, not made out of flesh and bones, but out of wires and steel. I got
Wow.
chills just telling you that. I mean, that's how this guy thought. He was so far ahead of his time. Uh, all these kids that have these robotic cars or planes, or they don't think that that thing has a mind inside. But Tesla's telling people in 1898 that this robot has a mind, has its own mind. I've been given it my own mind, but in the future it'll start to make decisions on its own. So it's the beginnings of artificial intelligence, all embedded in that one invention.
Wow. So we got electricity, we got cell phone technology, remote controls, robotics, AI, the
Encryption.
radio, encryption, um, pretty much the basis of most of the things that we use in our everyday life, which is phenomenal. Why don't we lead into I guess the final one was transporting wireless power that we never got to see. I mean, we see little baby versions of it today, but I guess the Warden Cliffe was the ultimate
Yeah.
kind of vision.
Well, he runs out of money with Warden Cliffe. And we made the television show, The Tesla File. There's 5 shows. I highly recommend it. I helped write the shows and
Nice. Where can we see that?
on Amazon.
Oh, nice. Tesla
Uh,
files.
and we discovered, whether there were tunnels on the bottom of this tower, and there were 4 tunnels. You go down about 70 feet, and he had these earth grippers, which gripped the earth. So this is in 1906. Morgan ends Tesla's career at Wardenclyffe. I mean, and he suffers a huge breakdown. So in 1914, right around there, 1915, he begins to work for the Germans. Now, this is Germany, World War One starts around 1914, but we don't get into the war until 1917. America doesn't get in. So it's perfectly okay to work with the Germans at this time. And in fact, the U.S. Navy had studied Marconi's system and studied Telefunken's system and decided that Telefunken was a much better system. So they were putting German wireless communication systems on U.S. Navy ships. Um, so Tesla was hired as a consultant, and they were using Tesla's patents. In Germany, the Kaiser allowed patent piracy. So he didn't get a single cent, even though his stuff was being stolen and used in Germany. But once they came to America, they had to uh, praise Tesla and make known that they were using his technology, and they gave him a very good salary, and they also gave him a piece of the action. He was getting a percentage of the monies that they were raising through the wireless communication. So when Tesla went out to Sayville, which was not too far from Wardenclyffe, out on Long Island, he told Jonathan Zenneck, who had just come in from Europe, you've got to increase your ground connections. Zenneck thought you just send it through the air, like Marconi's system. And Tesla said, no, you send it through the ground. You want to almost eliminate sending electricity through the air. You want to send it through the ground. And I think one of the most important articles in the whole history of studying Tesla's life, and I've studied his life daily for 40 something years, is an article in 1915 in the New York Times, which says that the Sayville plant tripled its power. And when you get into the dating of it, it tripled its power after they listened to Tesla. And the reason they were much more powerful is because they increased their ground connection. That's how you transmit power. So when you look at the wireless system at Wardenclyffe and his earth grippers, it looks like a mushroom. You have this big top at the top, and then it comes down. The top of the tower is not used to radiate electricity. It's used to collect the energy. It's collected in bulbs, and then it's driven down to the earth and then out. And so he said it's based on conduction, that you could get 95 or more percent of all the electricity power from his tower. You could send 90 something percent to Europe, to any place. He never was able to complete all that. He needed receiving towers. And I think that was another reason why Morgan was leery of Tesla. So he not only needed to build a tower on Long Island, he needed to build a tower in England to receive the electricity that would be sent that way. So if you're asking the ultimate question, uh, could Tesla transmit electrical power? We actually did that, Travis Taylor and myself working, with him remotely. In the first show of the Tesla files, he sets up two Tesla coils. One Tesla coil has all the energy. It transfers the energy to the other Tesla coil. That Tesla coil is wired to in a boat. It's through a wire, but that boat is being operated by wireless power, because the original energy is coming from this tower. It's sending it through the earth to this tower, and that tower is now getting the boat to move around. That's in the very first show. So just that's how brilliant Travis was. He was able to get this thing to happen almost like over a weekend, to establish that electrical power can be sent through the earth. And one of the things I told Travis is to do the experiment where you take a light bulb and then stick it into the ground. When you stick it in the ground, we'll see if it lights up. And sure enough, it lit up. And then when he lifted it, it didn't light up. So we worked all that out to explain that Tesla really had, I believe very strongly that Tesla was going to uh, transmit electrical power, and that the entire wireless world that we live in through radio um, evolved in an inferior way with a much more powerful situation. When you're in a car and you get about 20 or 30 miles away from the radio station, it disappears on you. Um, and that's because most of it's being sent through the air.
Wow. Well, that's fascinating, and I know that's only some of his ideas and inventions. I wanted to kind of, before we end, lead into more of the esoteric side of things. I know that, Tesla was quote unquote a spiritual guy, and he saw like spirituality and science is not mutually exclusive. And I know that, his father was a Serbian Orthodox priest, and his mother taught him like folklore, and he learned the Bible photographically and memorized it. He was very into the spiritual lifestyle. I don't know if he called himself a Christian, but like he respected religions because he saw there was merit to spirituality. But I know that he was into frequencies, and now when we talk about the new age movements, or even like progressive kind of people who are trying to merge science and spirituality, like I guess we are. Tesla comes up. So I wanted to kind of pick your brain on that aspect of Tesla and what fascinates you most in that realm.
I've been studying Tesla literally daily since 1976. So do the math. I don't know, it's 40 something years. When we did the Tesla files, it went out to 40 different countries, and people from all over the world wrote to me and they gave me information. For instance, I got information from a guy who was getting his doctorate in Russia, and they declassified Tesla's negotiations with Joseph Stalin when he was trying to sell him the particle beam weapon. So I have a lot of that in this book, Wizard at War. One of the things about Tesla was what he called his dynamic theory of gravity. I mentioned the concept in the first book, which was published in 1996, but I didn't totally understand what the dynamic theory of gravity was. And I really get into it in this book. And it's an amazing story when you finally figure the whole thing out. What is gravity? I would always joke that people in Australia, why don't they fall off the earth? Because they're at the bottom. Why don't they fall off? What's holding us to the earth? Are we attracted to the earth? That's what I thought gravity was. We're attracted to the earth. That's not Tesla's theory, dynamic theory of gravity. What Tesla is saying is that all objects absorb energy all of the time. So for instance, this phone is absorbing energy. This pen is absorbing energy. My brain is absorbing energy. This chair is absorbing energy. These books are absorbing energy. But the earth is absorbing a tremendous amount of energy. So according to Tesla's dynamic theory of gravity, the reason why you fall back to the earth when you jump up is not that you're attracted to the earth, but that you're in the way of this influx of a tremendous amount of energy. Now, I did a lot of studying of Einstein and his life. And Einstein spent the last 35 or 40 years of his life trying to combine gravity with electromagnetism. And this is called grand unification. There are four forces to the universe. There's a strong nuclear force, which holds the nucleus together. There's the weak nuclear force, which holds neutrons together. There's electromagnetism, which holds molecules together. And there's gravity, which holds planets together. They've been able to combine the first three forces, the strong, the weak nuclear force, and electromagnetism, but they've been unable to combine that with gravity. That's called grand unification. Einstein spent 40 years trying to do that. I'm going to do it in the next 2 minutes.
Yes, I'm excited.
Okay. So if if the Earth is absorbing energy all the time, if this thing is absorbing energy all the time, what does it do with the energy? I have a book right up here. It's called 30 Years That Shook Physics. It's written by Gamow, George Gamow, Gamow. He is one of the founders of quantum mechanics. His friends and colleagues are Einstein, Bohr, all of the Pauli, all of the greats of quantum physics. He's one of those greats. That's who he is. So in his book, he talks about Goudsmit and Uhlenbeck. They were trying to figure out the electron. So you have a nucleus and you have the electron circling the nucleus. So you can discuss the space. There are three coordinates in space: the x, y, z, and axis. So when they had the x, y, and z in axis for the electron, they found it didn't completely explain where the electron was. There was a missing component, and that missing component was electron spin. That spin was discovered by Goudsmit and Uhlenbeck around 1925. And what Gamow says in his book, 30 Years That Shook Physics, is that the electron, in order to generate electromagnetism, would have to spin faster than the speed of light. So the electron is orthorotating faster than the speed of light. He said it wasn't a problem for quantum physics, it was a problem for Einstein because Einstein hypothesized that nothing could travel faster than the speed of light. So Wolfgang Pauli came along and he said, let's call electron spin the square root of -1, which is an imaginary number. So if you take this imaginary number, the square root of -1, and make it equivalent to the three coordinates of space of where the electron is located, you can combine Einstein's theory of relativity with quantum mechanics, and Pauli got a Nobel Prize for doing that. But what about the idea that the electron's actually spinning at a tachyonic realm, which is faster than the speed of light? So here's where what I think grand unification is. I believe Tesla's right. I think that all matter is absorbing energy all of the time. And what is that energy doing? It's being transformed into electromagnetism. So that's how you combine gravity with electromagnetism. The electron is absorbing energy. That's the gravitational aspect. It's spinning faster than the speed of light and generating electromagnetism. And the proof of that for me is not me. It's Goudsmit and Uhlenbeck, two very well-known quantum physicists, and George Gamow, who said that the electron, in order to absorb energy, had to spin faster than the speed of light. Otherwise, you couldn't explain it. And since it violated relativity, they used the mathematical equation of imaginary number square root of -1. So that's what I think grand unification is. I think all energy is absorbing matter all the time, and it's transforming that matter into electromagnetism. That's combining Tesla's theory and quantum physics, and it solves a problem that Einstein spent 40 years trying to figure out. The other point I want to make here is that you never stop learning with Tesla. It took me years and years to figure that out. And I'm working now on cosmic rays. He talked about harnessing cosmic rays. I've got an article that I'm putting together on that. So that's why Tesla is so fascinating for me. I never stop learning if you just keep studying Tesla.
That's amazing. How does that? I know that a lot of things in quantum physics are now becoming relatable to Tesla. And like, what are your thoughts? Because Tesla talked about ether a lot and like the field. Um, what are your thoughts on the field, like slash ether? Because they tried to say mainstream science tries to say that there is no field, there's nothing, there's no mesh that holds everything together. But a lot of people are starting to say that there is. So
Yeah, well, first of all, one of Tesla's logos was a spiral galaxy. It's a, you know, I look at a spiral galaxy and I've always felt it's floating in something. I mean, you see this thing, it's not just in nowheresville, it's floating in something. That something is the ether. And what Tesla's dynamic theory of gravity is, it's absorbing ether. It's absorbing primary before matter, some primary substance, which we're calling prana or, kasha, this etheric energy. Um, I think that Tesla's rotating magnetic field, and I explained it all on something like page 19 or 21 in this book. You can spend 5 or 10 minutes understanding it. This concept of two circuits out of phase with each other, creating, the induction motor and all that. I think Tesla felt that the source of the universe was two frequencies out of phase with each other. The Big Bang can't explain spin. And it also can't explain why planets are perfectly round. I think Tesla's theory explains why planets are perfectly round because you have a piece of matter floating in space and it's absorbing energy equally all around it. And so it would be round because it's equal, in all fashions. So I think spin and also the fact that the planets and stars are circular, I think that's all linked to Tesla's belief that that the spiral galaxy has a hidden secret in it, and that the spiral galaxy might be directly linked to his rotating magnetic field, and that instead of the Big Bang, instead of a giant explosion, maybe it's two frequencies out of phase with each other that crisscross that's involved with the creation of the universe. Um,
wow,
so that's some of my thinking about all that.
that's fascinating. I did kind of want to end on where you think we're headed as a civilization if all goes well, uh, from the ideologies of Tesla. If Tesla could have made the world that he wanted, which he set out to do, what do you think that direction is for humanity?
It's actually another book I put together. It's co-written with
Okay.
four different authors called Ozone Therapy for the Treatment of Viruses. Tesla invented an ozone generator in 1896. Why did he invent an ozone generator? Because he studied Simmons and he knew that ozone kills viruses. What was discovered by Paul Wentworth in 2001 is that our own antibodies manufacture ozone. How do we kill the viruses that attack us? When we get a vaccine, as I said before, the vaccines don't kill anything. Our body does that. So if you study the immune system, study the antibody system, you'll find that our antibodies, as Paul Wentworth discovered from Scripps Institute, manufactures ozone. And Mitchison and Look discovered that our bodies also manufacture hydrogen peroxide. So we do that. So you're asking what the future is. I'm working very hard to try and get the world to recognize that in the 300 medical doctors here in the United States, there's thousands of ozone therapists throughout the world, that if we simply emulate what our own antibodies are doing, we will be able to vanquish, we will be able to end a lot of diseases, including shingles, malaria, West Nile, herpes, Lyme disease. All those diseases are linked to Tesla's invention of the ozone generator. So I think, what would Tesla's world be today if he was still around? I think he would still be selling his ozone machines, and he'd be trying to alert the medical community that we simply should just understand how nature is killing off these viruses. In writing this book, that I put together, I read something very interesting. If you go to the ocean and you take a glass, I have a little bit of orange juice left, so I'll drink. But you could go to the ocean and you could get a handful or a cupful of water. In that cup of ocean water are 10,000 or 10 billion viruses. You can drink that glass of ocean water and won't kill you. Why? Because our immune system is so incredibly fantastic that it can vanquish all these viruses and cancers, et cetera, et cetera. We're fighting off all that all the time. So I think it's just following Goethe's idea that all the secrets of nature are uh, where we should be studying. And for me, right now, I'm involved in trying to completely understand the immune system on that same concept that Mother Nature is smarter than us. Uh, the immune system is the product of hundreds of millions of years, chance mutation, survival of the fittest. And over these hundreds of millions of years, it's learned how to protect us. I have a friend just the other day. He has diabetes, and his toe got infected, and he doesn't have much feeling in his toes. He almost died. He went to the hospital, and they gave him a lot of antibodies and antibiotics, and he's okay. But it shows how rapidly, if the immune system breaks down, how rapidly things can go wrong. We're fighting for all this all the time. So I think Tesla's vision for the future would certainly be in studying the immune system in figuring out how, if the immune system is producing ozone, then how do we harness that? I think also he'd be very happy about the wireless age. The very fact that you and me, Nam, right now, we're like sitting in the same room together, and that's what
Yeah.
Tesla was pleading with Morgan. He said, Morgan, I know I built a larger tower than you, but I'm going to advance the world a century. And you'll be able to talk to your friend in Australia like you're sitting in the same room with him. You'll be able to talk to a friend in China. I've actually had, group talks with China, Australia, England, and the United States all in one Zoom meeting. That's Tesla's world. So we're living in very much Tesla's world. But for me, he is a touchstone. He's constantly provoking me to think even more, to continue to learn, to continue to grow. That's who Tesla really is. He's an incredible inspiration, and the essence of creativity. And so that's it for me. But I'm
Yeah.
so I feel blessed that I discovered him and early in the game in the 1970s and was able to capitalize on that.
Well, we're very grateful for your work, and I'm very excited about delving into the books. Why don't you tell people where they can find your work?
Yeah, yeah. So I have two books, Wizard, The Life and Times of Nikola Tesla, which is his whole life chronologically. And then I expand on some of the areas of his life in Tesla Wizard at War, which is the newer book. In the newer book, as I said, I have recently declassified documents from the Soviet Union, a lot of stuff from the British War Office that has never been published before. Tesla's link to the heads of people in World War II, including General McNaughton, who was the head of secret weapons development for the British Empire, um, and also the dynamic theory of gravity, which I discussed. So they're available in Barnes and Noble and also at Amazon.
Nice.
And I know you guys will enjoy the books.
And for anybody that doesn't have access to Amazon, can they order off another site or no?
Yeah, well, as I said, Barnes and Noble. And
Okay.
if you actually just Google my name, that will pop uh, either of these books, and there are many distribution channels, not just Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
That's
Um,
amazing. I know a lot of people from the Balkans are watching this, so Do you have any books translated in Serbo-Croatian or not yet?
Yeah, Wizard is translated into Croatian and into Serbian. It's translated into Russian. It's translated into Chinese.
Great.
Uh, this Wizard at War is translated to Spanish and a couple of the Slavic countries.
Nice. Okay, well, I'm sure people will do you have a website, a direct website?
Yes, my website is my name, marcseifer.com, MarcSeifer.com. I've also written four novels and a couple other science books. And, I'm not going to talk about novels today, but, I'm a good writer and I've written a lot of exciting uh, books that kind of based on my life, but I fictionalize in these novels.
And
Um,
you have a TV show.
and I have this television show, The Tesla Files, went out to 40 countries, and it's really a good show. Travis Taylor is one of the people that we had on the show. He's got two PhDs in physics. Can you imagine that?
Wow.
The guy's very bright and very enjoyable experience. Prometheus Films, the guys that do Ancient Astronauts and The Mystery of Oak Island, it's that group.
Wow.
Wonderful, wonderful people.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. I'm sure the people that attended the conference will be really grateful for this video and the people that couldn't make it as well. So thanks for your time today. I really appreciate you.
Okay, now, great to see you again.
You too. Okay, got that done. Thank you once again. I really appreciate you, Mark. That was awesome. Really
Okay.
enjoyed that chat.